So, Jeanie, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you very much for talking to me. So, I read something quite interesting that you posted. I think it was in one of in our Facebook group. You said that by doing ozone saunas, you knocked out an acute flu infection. Is this right?
That's what I believe. I don't have any tests to prove it. I'm a massage therapist, and I've been working full time as a massage therapist for 5 years. I've been a massage therapist longer, but I've noticed an interesting recurrence yearly, right about the time that people start getting their flu shots. And I see those little band-aids on people's arms where they're getting the flu shots. I start feeling bad, and I suspect it's not because I'm not getting the shot and I'm susceptible to the flu. It's like my hands are on people, and I'm getting a real dose of this live vaccine through people's skin. And about 3 months ago, usually this is in October, and just a variety of things happened. I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago now. I came home one Wednesday evening and I knew I didn't feel well. My tummy was upset. And I've had concussions and things, so you never know what quite is going on. But the next morning I woke up and I said, achy, nauseous, don't want to eat, and a little bit of a fever. And I said, this is the flu. And my first thought was, wow, I wish I had an ozone sauna. So I have a sauna. I have a heat sauna, but I wasn't connecting my ozone to it. Everything's over here. And just that day, the universe must have heard me, and somebody posted in our group that you need 25 gamma in an ozone sauna. And I thought, I can do that. I didn't think I could do this. Make my single chamber Promo Life Elite 03. I didn't think it was strong enough for an ozone sauna. So I set it up, took me 5 minutes less, and got in it. I could feel a difference. I could feel the pressure in my head going down. And then I slept because I was not feeling well. That evening I got in the ozone sauna again. I completely forgot about taking vitamin C. I slept again. The next day, I said, why don't I add some high-dose vitamin C, because this would not... Usually, viruses hang out inside the cells, is what I've learned. And I take I make my own lipid encapsulated vitamin C. So I took a dose of about 5 or 6 grams and noticed a difference, slept again, lots of fluid, wasn't eating. I was maybe taking a little bit of chicken broth. That was it. So after 2 days of this, my fever was gone, my achiness was gone, I slept a lot, I drank lots of fluid. The second day I took 24 grams of lipid encapsulated vitamin C, and it wasn't until I took the last 6 grams that I hit bowel intolerance, which is pretty amazing. I don't think I've ever done that. So I think my body was really using it. And I could tell, I know my body very well. As a massage therapist, I train people to listen to their body, and I do this practice myself. And I know my body well enough where I could tell the next day I could go to work. I wasn't feeling infectious. I went in, I did 8 or 9 hours of massage the next day. Was I 100%? No. But I hit the road going. I've never gotten rid of the flu that fast. That was, it completely amazed me.
So usually how long does it take you for the flu to go away?
Well, I haven't had the flu in quite a while. It really surprised me when I had these symptoms. It had been maybe 5 years since I had felt the full-blown flu. And previously, it would be quite a while. Now, yes, I would say at least a week, 10 days.
So how many ozone saunas did you do, and in what time span this time?
So I did 3, actually, I think I said 4, but it was 3 in 36 hours. because it wasn't until maybe the afternoon that Thursday that I figured out, oh, I can do the ozone sauna. So once I did the one, I kind of slept and I really didn't do anything else. I just did a lot of, I actually got in this other device, which is a full body PEMF unit called a magnosphere. So I did a lot of napping in that day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you did PMF and the ozone saunas, yes?
Together, but I've had this PEMF unit for quite a while, and it's never, whenever I have felt under the weather, it has helped me when I've been dealing with issues. The reason I bought this, I should preface this, about 3 years ago this summer, I had all the hidden infection removed from my mouth. I studied with Dr. Jerry Tennant, MD, who's out in Colleyville, Texas, about 30 minutes from here. And he showed me, he's an ophthalmologist, and he was at death's door about 30 years ago. And basically Harvard Medical School said, go home, get your affairs in order, you're done for, you know, there's no drug, no surgery that can help you. And he found a variety of things that helped him heal at a cellular level. And PEMF equipment was one of them, but what was very instrumental and what helped him get his immune system back online was removing any hidden infection. And standard of care doesn't, per se, know how to look for hidden infection. I'm not talking about in the teeth. I'm actually talking about in the jaw, because standard of care, you probably know this, when you remove a wisdom tooth or any tooth that you pull, they wiggle it until it dislodges from the ligaments. They put some antibiotic, they close you up, and they send you home with a prescription for antibiotics. What new dentistry is realizing is that after you remove the tooth, you actually have to go in and remove the ligament remnants. Because that, if you leave that in there, that becomes food for bacteria. So I have had 3 wisdom teeth only, but I had 1, 2, 3 root canals, and I had those removed. And last 2 years ago in July, my dentist discovered my wisdom teeth and these places where these root canals had been removed. I just decided, because of everything I've learned with root canals, I just wanted them out, because they're dead teeth, the root canals. So what he did, he went in and he cleaned those sockets all the way to the bone. He actually took ozone. See, my dentist studied with Dr. Jerry Tennant, and one of the protocols he recommends is ozone. So my dentist shot ozone into each cleaned socket and packed each socket with something called platelet-rich fibrum, which is made from my own blood. And it's literally my own stem cells. So what it does is it accelerates healing in these places where he cleaned out. He then, so there was the ozone, the platelet-rich fibrum, and he sewed me up, and my friend owned some equipment. I did not own this at that time. My friend invited me to go over to her house because this equipment is very good at preventing infection. I don't know it's the best for, because when you're in the jaw area, there's not a whole lot of circulation. There's a blood-brain barrier that we have to get through. And once you have infection in that area, my understanding and my experience is you pretty much have to open it up and clear it out, shoot some ozone, which is the gas, and it gets up into the bone, which is porous. But after I had all this work done, this was 6 sites in my jaw. It was a major outpatient surgery that I had that day. Having those 6 sites opened, went over to my friend's house, and I was in about a level of 9 pain, and we put it on the frequency to prevent infection, to help with infection. I did not use any antibiotics. I did not use any pain medications. She let me go over her house 3 times a week for the next month. And that's why I eventually bought one of these, because I saw how powerful it was. After a major surgery, I had to not take any antibiotics, which I was ecstatic about.
So the PMF helped you with the pain after the surgery?
It took it from a level of 9 down to about 1. I could feel, actually one of the root canals I had taken out that day, and that's major when having a tooth taken out, because that took about 45 minutes for him to get it out so as not to break off the root and so on. And I could still feel, it was like I could still feel him pulling on it for about, felt like he was still pulling on it for about 24 hours. But after I got in her PEMF unit, which is not the exact same model, she has a professional model, this is a home unit. It went from a level of 9 to a level of 1, and I was able to sleep. Now, I should say, I also have, this is Dr. Tennant's equipment, and this is a handheld PEMF unit that he makes, and this is what's called a transducer. This is an attachment that goes into this handheld piece. Now, if all I had was one site opened up, this would have been sufficient. But since I had 6 sites, imagine holding this for 6 hours. So for me, in my case, I was very glad that my friend had that particular piece of equipment. And they're just 2 different applications. They're very similar. They're both PEMF. This one's portable. Dr. Tennant's is portable. This is actually portable. I can break it down in about 7 minutes, and it has a very simple package that I can put it into, and I suppose fly it or drive it anywhere that I want to. So this one is portable, but I just don't want to do that.
Okay, so the PMF, you got them mostly to help you with the dental, with the jaw surgeries, but not so much for the flu symptoms.
No. What this piece of equipment, what I've discovered, what I've learned from Dr. Jerry Tennant, there are many benefits of PEMF, many benefits. Royal Raymond Rife did much research. We can all look that up. And I used to own a Rife machine. I prefer these equipments over the Rife machine. But what this machine does, and what the other one does, which I never learned how to do with the Rife equipment, is there's a way to, these help the nervous system to move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. And anytime we can do that, the body's own innate healing mechanisms are going to engage. And so there's a way to do it with both pieces of equipment. There's been clinical research done on both. This one for the purpose of returning vets from war that have PTSD, they have found it very beneficial to help move veterans to the parasympathetic, which helps lower PTSD.
Yeah, I've also used PMF in the past, and I liked it a lot. But back to your flu story. So when you started getting the infection, on a scale from 0 to 10, with the 0 being no symptoms and feeling great, to 10 being completely sick and unable to work, how bad were you? What would you say at the beginning, before you started up the ozone?
That morning I woke up with symptoms about a 6 and could feel them going in the direction of getting sicker. So I knew I had to act fast. And that's when I had the thought, if I could only get in an ozone sauna, and magically appeared in the group somebody's comment that you need 25 gamma ozone to put into the ozone sauna. So I set it up with 25 gamma at a fairly good flow, and voila, it worked.
So it was at a 6 on the scale from 0 to 10. So
6, yes.
Okay.
I could tell that, literally, I did not go anywhere that day. I could tell I could tell I was very achy and very nauseous. That's why I knew it was the flu, with the fever. And
So
I mean,
fever,
I
achiness, feeling nauseous. So did you
could not eat.
could not eat? Okay. Did you feel like you could work that day, or were you about to cancel work?
I was off work, thank goodness, that day and the next day. So this was perfect timing with my days off.
I see. So you did the first sauna on that first day, then you went to sleep, and then the next day you did two more saunas. Yes?
I woke up the next morning not feeling 100%, but I could tell I was not moving in the direction of getting sicker. I was feeling more at ease. That's actually, for the first time, it's like, oh, I'm kind of just a little bit hungry, but I don't want to put food, so that's when I decided just to have some bone soup,
Mm-hmm.
some minerals. And so I make my own bone soup, so I made some immediately. It took me 5 minutes. And got in the ozone sauna, and then basically hung out in the magnosphere. Again, I've had the magnosphere for a long time, and no, I haven't had the flu recently, but I've never felt the effect that I did with the ozone sauna. And now I've been doing the ozone sauna daily.
Okay.
And
So that was ozone sauna number 2, and after that you felt a slight improvement, or how did you feel?
I was drinking lots of fluids, sleeping a lot. Whenever I woke up in the afternoon and did another ozone sauna, and oh, I believe there was a headache. I believe that first day that I woke up, there was also a headache involved. And the headache was reduced. And by the third ozone sauna, I thought, okay, I chanced it. I thought, well, I think I'm going, by that time, by the third one, my fever was gone. I was checking my fever frequently by the third one. And I said, my fever's gone now. I think I'll be fine to go to work tomorrow. And so the next morning I did one more ozone sauna just to bolster me before I went to work.
Uh-huh. I see. And after that,
I've been
you were good to go.
Yeah, that's the next morning when I did the ozone sauna again. When you have the flu, there's kind of pressure in the head, and I could feel the pressure going down, down, down. That was the thing that I felt in my first ozone sauna. Now, I've had lots of concussions over my lifetime. I've had lots of head injuries. And so I'm very sensitive to when the pressure goes up and down. And by the third one, the pressure, it was much more dramatic, those first few ozone saunas. But in the morning for me now, yes, by the third one, the pressure was down. I could move my head around, and I could feel my neck cracking, things opening up in my neck. And I've had bone on bone in my neck. Things were beginning to change and adjust in my neck. And it's the next morning I got up and did another one. I felt even better. I went to work on Saturday. I came, by the end of the day, it's like, oh boy, I'm getting back in that sauna. I got in again, woke up the next morning, felt great, got in the sauna again. It was like I was not going to I wasn't going to stop until I could do just one sauna a day. And honestly, I don't remember how long I did 2 saunas a day, probably 4 or 5 days.
Probably what? I didn't catch that.
4 or 5 days. I did 2 saunas a day. Once I went back to work, there was maybe 3 days that I continued to do it in the morning and the evening, just to support.
I see. So even after you felt that the worst was over, you kept doing the saunas, and the first days you kept doing them twice daily, just to make sure that everything was knocked out. Yes?
Not only that, but because I was noticing such a decrease in the pressure in my sinuses, that was my motivation also. Like, oh, let's get this feels good, let me do this again.
That's fantastic. That's great. And you know what I find interesting, and you know I like promoting those ozone saunas because I think they're such a great alternative to ozone IVs. And nowadays everyone thinks it has to be an IV and it has to be the Tempest to be effective, but that's totally not true. And the ozone saunas I think are a great home treatment, and they're not invasive. You don't need any needles. You don't need any doctor to do any infusions, to lay any lines and anything. And and I think they're very, very powerful, and your story supports that. So
I have to agree. Yeah.
yeah. So, and you suspect that you got the flu from someone who had a vaccine and who was shedding the virus. Yes.
I was noticing maybe half of my guests. I work in a luxury hotel at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas, and I was noticing about half of my clients, half of my guests, had the Band-Aid where they had gotten the shot. And I could ask a simple question, they mentioned how they had gotten the shot, and so I was just keeping track of it. And it was shortly after that that I began to notice that I felt the flu symptoms.
Right.
So you know it's a live virus that they're using now.
So you suspect it was from someone who was shedding the virus and not from someone who was openly fighting an infection, because you weren't treating anyone who was openly sick.
No, I don't think it was, because at that time, what's interesting about your question there is, at that time I wasn't using the ozone until I felt the flu symptoms. Now that I have the ozone sauna, I actually have worked with people. I worked with somebody yesterday or the day before or maybe it was 3 days ago, it was recently, that got on my table and I could tell they were not well. And I thought, what are you doing in here? I could have turned them away, but with let me get rid of this, I'm so sorry. With the knowledge that I have access to my ozone sauna, I thought to myself, well, I've got a way to support myself. So I worked with her. I worked with her without fear, and one of my specialties is deep tissue without pain. And so that requires a lot of skin contact. I use my forearm quite a bit, so I've got a lot of area that I'm getting contact with. And I monitored myself, and I did not come home and do an ozone sauna that evening, but I did do one the next day. And I never had any symptoms, and she was one big puppy. So it's been a relief to me to have this tool to continue using and to have it in my home, because what it's allowing me to do is to be in contact with people that are not well, and being a health practitioner, that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been sick. I haven't had the flu or a cold in 5 years, and in the last 10 years, I've been sick only one time, and it was very, very mild. It was like 2 or 3 days. And I fully believe that, I know for a fact that it was the ozone that did that. And before.
So were you using an ozone sauna, or what did you use to feel better?
I would do various things. I've been doing the IVs, the sauna, the insufflation. A recent episode that I can remember that was maybe 3 years ago. My dad came back from China and he was sick with either the flu or something. And I felt some symptoms come on. And so I did a vaginal insufflation for 10 minutes, and by the time the insufflation was done, all the symptoms were gone, and it's never developed to anything. So I never got sick. So I believe that with a flu, ozone is really it can always help you. It will always help you. It's just a matter of how much of the ozone you do and
Right.
how frequently. You know,
Right.
so one application, one sauna may not be enough. So what you did was exactly the perfect scenario.
So something that just occurred to me, those first sessions were an hour each. I did not sit in there for a short time.
Oh wow.
They were an hour each. Now I typically do about 20 minutes.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And I let my ozone sauna get very hot before I get in it. And I also drink about 25 ounces of water before I get in it, so it helps my sweat to come to the surface.
Right. Okay, so you said that before you started the ozone saunas that you were on a 6 on the scale from 0 to 10, and so after the 3 saunas, how would you estimate that? At where on the scale were you?
By the time I went back to work, the only symptom that I was concerned about, my adrenals were shot. I could feel that my I had energy, but I could, if I was looking ahead at the day, I didn't know what my day was going to look like, but guessing it was, since it's a Saturday and we're busy on Saturdays, I was guessing potentially I could have 8 or 9 hours. And always when you're not feeling 100%, you get those 9 hours. And that's what I had that day. And I also do the liposomal vitamin C. I actually did 2 versions of it. I did 2 doses of it that day. Since then, I've been listening to what you said about oxalates, and so I've dropped that back to once a day, 5 to 6 grams. And that seems to be okay. And I really want to thank you for what you brought to the forefront about the oxalates, is because I've had neuropathy in my right leg from a car accident 35 years ago. I was in my mid-20s, and my pubic symphysis was fractured on each side and right in the middle where it separates when a female gives birth. And this is one of the reasons I chose to never have children, because I just was experiencing a lot of aches and pains in that area. So shortly after that accident, I started having significant pain. I was having a hard time standing on both feet. I would feel like a sharp pain in my right inguinal, and I've had hypothesis over the years. I think that there was an impinged nerve. I mean, I literally had neuropathy symptoms in my right leg of numbness and actual feeling like there were needles in my joints in both my knee and my ankle. And this went on for years and left me in levels of pain of 8, 9, 10 for years. Even if I was sitting, standing, or laying down. And it got to the point where I could work very little, maybe 15, 20 hours a week. And fortunately, I set up my life where I could do that. I could afford to do that. But I didn't want to stay there. So this is what has driven me to investigate so much of everything that I've investigated. When you brought up oxalates, I just began to look at my history and how my eating habits have changed, because I had gone from what I considered fairly healthy, but with grains, and then I went to paleo, and that helped me a lot. Adding a well-rounded supplement, finding supplements that were supported, that helped a lot. Getting rid of hidden infection, that helped me a lot. Using the portable PEMF equipment, which actually you can measure the meridian, you can measure the voltage in your meridians. You can literally, there's different ways to measure the voltage in the meridians, and I knew which meridians were low for me. It didn't surprise me. I could actually use this portable equipment, wear it on my hips, and kind of stay plugged in to keep those low voltage areas higher voltage, which let me work longer days. So it's not just one thing. But with the oxalates, what was interesting, for quite a while, I grew up loving vegetables. I would pretty much eat any vegetable, and I didn't have pain growing up until I started having accidents. But when I started listening to you about the oxalates and noticing the foods that I'm really craving are low oxalate foods, and I had just naturally been shunning the other foods, and I would occasionally eat them. Now, nuts, I did like nuts, and those are very high in oxalates, unless you soak them maybe for 3 days and pour off the liquid, but that's a whole nother subject. But since I've gotten some good books and really been paying attention, I'm already at a pretty low oxalate diet. All my pain in my right leg has pretty much disappeared.
Wow.
So thank you for that. Yeah, and it's like it was the last bastion. I have some hypothesis here because of the tissue damage that I've had with accidents. The accident that fractured my pelvis, I was T-boned. I was hit by a car on my left side. It caused a lot of tissue damage all along my whole left side. And for whatever reason, there was, I suspect it was nerve damage in my right leg, but also as I was probably eating very high in oxalates with nuts and spinach and things like that, I think the excess oxalates were going to these damage where there was tissue damage.
Right.
Nobody's told me that this is what it does, but I know that pathogens go to this area. I know excess calcium goes to this area, and so why not oxalates as well? And so since I've lowered to a low oxalate diet and been very cognizant of what I'm doing, not only do I not have pain, but in my joints, like I've had areas in my ankle that were restricted, and I'll be walking, or I would be hearing clicking as I'm working as a massage therapist, and literally I can feel chunks falling off of doctors would probably say I'm imagining this, but I could hear like a chunk fall off in my joint, a chunk of oxalates. And that's the only thing different that I've added in the last 3 weeks.
So you had some of that pain in the leg. You said you've had that for 35 years?
So I'll be 63 next week. So 25 to 63, it's almost 40 years.
Wow. Wow. So you had that pain for over 3 decades, and it only diminished after you cut out oxalates or after you reduced oxalates in your diet.
So with everything that I've experimented with, there have been times when it's lower, and then I'll injure myself and it'll come back up. And as a matter of fact, so it'll come back up. But once I was aware of what oxalates were doing, specifically in my right ankle joint and my right knee and my right hip, which has been so compromised right after the accident, and even as recently as 5 years ago and 1 year ago, I remember incidents in those 3 time frames where I was literally walking like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Right after my accident, I was in the hospital for a week with Demerol, IM, every 4 hours. It was significant pain. When I left, I was on crutches for 4 months. Best semester I ever had, because all I could do was eat, sleep, and study. And then after that, the pain started. Even then, the pain was pretty significant. My ischial tuberosities, my sit bones, I had to sit on. Fortunately, it was the dead of winter, and we had those big coats, and I would sit on the coat, and that was the only way I could sit in class during my classes. But my right sit bone has been very, very painful in that area, very close to the pubic symphysis. And that area has, for the first time, in 40 years begin to clear up, and I'm not feeling that achiness. Now, prior to this, I was a sprinter, and a very fast sprinter. And in my imagination, it's like, oh my gosh, I would love to. I'm not a long distance runner. I have fast twitch muscles. I don't have slow twitch muscles. I can't go for long distances, but I can go short bursts, like I'm a great tennis player. And so I can actually see the possibility of me getting out and possibly, it's like I haven't gone out and just tested my hips, but I can feel when they're in alignment, because otherwise it's just excruciating. It doesn't flow.
Do you think that the ozone may have also helped you with the pain?
I think it has. I think it has with my, I think it's helped with my nervous system, because when we experience extreme trauma, it leaves us vulnerable to pathogens. And so those pathogens can be very painful. From what I understand, I'm very blessed that for the most part, all of my health challenges have been from accidents. But from what I've learned, whenever we get pathogens into our nervous system, the nerve highway is where the nervous system is where the pathogens can go all throughout our body through our nervous system. And I've heard one MD and one other practitioner, this may be out there more, but there's an interesting hypothesis that, for instance, I believe it's with Lyme, and maybe, I actually think this is true with most, any labels within the nervous system, that when you're not presenting with your symptoms, the pathogens go down and hide in the sacrum and in the tailbone, and they're dormant. And that as they begin to, for whatever reason, if we get stressed, if we have an injury, if we have chemical exposures, any type of inflammation, they will wake up. They will no longer be dormant. They'll wake up and they'll start traveling up the spine. And then when someone is showing full-blown symptoms, they'll be within the brain as well. So they can travel up and down. And I know doctors would poo-poo this, but I can feel this personally. And so whenever I'm feeling more pressure in my head, I get in my ozone, and it's like it lowers my pathogenic load.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I've never heard that, but what Sally K. Norton said, that I interviewed recently, she said that there is reason to believe that basically what you experience, and I have experienced that too, to believe that oxalates tend to accumulate in tissue that are damaged or injured. I also had an injury in my wrist, and it wasn't healing for a very long time. And I was eating high oxalate foods like carrots and celery root and beets on a daily basis. And then I went carnivore, so I was eating basically only meat. And that injury that didn't want to heal for a year or longer healed up in several months, in just I think 2 or 3 months, and the pain was gone. So I think this is there's definitely something to it.
I had a similar experience. I fell. I had moved into a lovely duplex it was quite a while ago, maybe about 3.5 years ago. And when I'm going to sleep at night, I don't like overhead lights on because it has a tendency to wake you up. So I just went to one of the other rooms, and it wasn't all set up. And I tripped over something, and I fell right onto this part of my wrist. And I started having problems. And I would work with it would get better, and then it would go away. Probably every time I ate oxalates, it was aggravating. And I had a similar, as soon as I started consciously lowering my oxalates, it cleared up. And then Sunday night I came home and I said, this is amazing. I just did last weekend, probably 15 hours of massage in 2 days, which is a significant amount of physical work. And I said, I feel really good after so much work. I get home, I'm doing a few chores, and I have a heavy closet door that slides, and it just banged right there. Now, I think it's still healing, so I went from having no pain. When it banged there, I'm really sensitive to when I get injured. It's like, it doesn't do much to set my nervous system off. When it banged there, it shut down my thumb, but it also compromised the fascia up in this area of my shoulder. And I thought, well, this is just another life lesson. So I just made sure that I was very careful with the oxalates, did as much ozone sauna as possible. And yes, it's healing much more quickly than I would have ever experienced before. This is an amazing little book that I highly recommend. Mm-hmm. They explain, it's called Living Low Oxalate by Melinda Keene, When Oxalate-Rich Foods Destroy Your Health. You can see it very little. And what I love about it is that it tells the why and the how in very few words.
Well, this has been very interesting. I got more than I thought I would. So we didn't only talk about ozone, but also about PEMF and oxalates. And I think especially oxalates, I think this is a huge issue, and I think they're responsible for so many ailments, and especially ailments and degenerative diseases that come along with age, but also autism. Like I think the scope of what oxalates can cause in symptoms and in conditions, I think we haven't even scratched the surface yet of that. So I think this is very important to talk about this. And I have my personal theory, and I heard a few stories that seem to support that, other few stories from other people who made a similar experience. So the theory that I have, and that group of people, is that Alpha Lipoic Acid can actually help the body push out oxalates.
It mentions that in this book.
Oh, really?
And so what I've noticed is I love being on round, because it not only it supports, as I'm moving oxalates out, it supports that process. I can feel it easing up.
Wait a minute, the author of that book, is this a he or she?
She does. Melinda Keene, Keen.
So she also thinks that alpha lipoic acid is able to push out oxalates, yes?
Yes, I don't know if she has clinical research showing that, but this is $15 off of Amazon. I highly recommend it. It's excellent. I will look it up, and I will see if I can send you a picture of what I read.
You know what? I should be able to find that based on what you showed me. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, and this also matches the experience that parents have who do the intracutler chelation with their kids, because their experience is that kids respond to the chelation much faster and much better than adults. And that would make sense, because you would assume that kids have a lower oxalate burden because they have been eating oxalates for a shorter time of their life, so they have just less of the oxalates, so they're able to get rid of them faster than someone who has been accumulating oxalates through food for 40, 50, or 60 years, right? And also in adults, this is what I talked with Sally K. Norton about. The oxalates can also cause calcifications, which maybe in adults may not be reversible, but in children, it's not that it's not that bad, right? There may not be any calcifications, but just the oxalate deposits. So I think this may also explain why kids respond so much better and so much faster to the Andrew Cutler chelation than adults. And that it has nothing to do with mercury, but with the oxalates, or maybe partially with the mercury and partially with the oxalates. That's my...
In terms of what you're talking about, the calcium buildup, something that I've discovered that has helped me, because I've had many doctors tell me what I'm feeling was arthritis, although now I'm convinced it's also oxalates. It's not just arthritis. But prior to paying attention to my oxalate intake, I started taking about 70 milligrams of boron a day. And that's, I know, a whole nother subject. I don't know if you've read about this, but the FDA recommends 3 milligrams a day. They say you should not take more than 3. Well, naturally occurring in the water and the food in Israel is they have 30 milligrams a day. They literally have no arthritis there. So from research that I've read, if you have arthritis, in order to clear it up, they suggest 60 to 70 a day, and maybe even higher if you can tolerate it. I found if I go much higher than that, I start getting nauseous, and that's where I wasn't quite sure when I started feeling those flu symptoms. Is this the boron, or is this the flu? And then I realized it actually was the flu, going back to our original conversation. But boron is amazing. I think we can clear up those calcium
deposits.
It's around our joints and in our muscles, both of them, because I can feel the lowering of, between the boron and watching my oxalates, my joints, the inflammation in my joints have gone down. Not completely, but from a scale of 1 to 10, I would say down to a 3. And it hasn't been that long since I'm doing this.
Well, that's been great. And once again, thank you very much for taking the time and doing this extensive interview. Yes, thank you once again.
My pleasure. Thank you, Paula. Have a great day.